The other weekend, I was in Fort Worth and stopped by Doc's Records and Vintage, a great little record store in the area about an hour's drive from where I live right now. I stumbled across At Mount Zoomer, which is Wolf Parade's sophomore LP from 2008 on Sub Pop Records. The closing track on this album is the whopping near 11-minute track Kissing the Beehive. It is my favorite song by Wolf Parade, and after returning home and giving the record spin, I kind of went down the rabbit hole. What are some truly amazing, long indie rock tracks in my collection that exceed 10 minutes? Technically, I started out with 8 minutes, so stay tuned for that. That's going to be part 2 of this 2-part series. In this video, I'm going to count down some of my favorites, my top 10 10-minute plus songs. But first, I want to ask the question, what makes a long song good? When I compiled this list of 10 songs, I wanted to figure out why these ones resonated so much with me. In doing so, I've been able to pinpoint 4 key components of what makes a long song good. Each song on this list has at least one of these elements. Many of them have more than one. Some have pretty much all 4. So number 1 is story and narrative. A band takes us on a journey, crafting a story along the way. The story may be heavily shrouded in metaphor, or they may lay it out all on the table. Either way, it conveys message and meaning. Number 2, movements and compartmentalization. Some songs have distinct movements that carry the song and break it apart into distinct sections, each of which re-engages the listener and provides a break and kind of something new along the way. Movements allow for thematic cohesiveness while essentially breaking one long song into multiple shorter ones. Number 3, emotional depth. I have always been drawn to a song that hits you in the feels. Emotion is often what draws me to the song, and it's a critical part of the best long songs, especially those with lengthy emotional narratives. And finally, number 4 is instrumental breakdowns, experimentations, and solos. There are excellent instrumental breakdowns, from driving beats to droning guitars to solos from a variety of instruments. A good, lengthy track sometimes leans on other members in the group, outside of the vocalist, to help propel it to absolute greatness. So, what are my top 10 indie songs that are over 10 minutes? I have to start with the one that kicked off this series. This is hands down my favorite track by Wolf Parade, as I mentioned, and they've got some pretty solid tracks throughout their career as well. Several on their 2005 debut, Apologies to the Queen Mary, are tracks I revisit regularly, as are California Dreamer off this album At Mount Zoomer. Kissing the Beehive is the long one, and it is surprisingly emotive, and Wolf Parade incorporates a fair amount of experimentation, guitar solos, instrumental breaks, and almost even like minor movement elements. So there is the first track on my list, Kissing the Beehive by Wolf Parade off of At Mount Zoomer. Next, you cannot talk about long indie rock tracks without name-dropping the Decemberists. With clever wordplay, real and fictional historical references woven into the lyrics, and a penchant for storytelling, the Decemberists tend to add at least one 8-minute plus track to their records. On vinyl, this one, The Tane, is a split of 2 EPs, The Tane and 5 songs, with The Tane being a single 5-part track that extends just over a stunning 18.5 minutes. This multi-movement epic track by the Decemberists is truly great. Are you eager for more from the Decemberists? Because they have plenty. I recommend checking out California 1/Youth and Beauty Brigade off of their debut LP, Castaways and Cutouts. You've got the Mariner's Revenge song off of Picaresque, and The Island off The Crane Wife. Spiritualized was born from the ashes of the neo-psychedelic outfit Spaceman 3 in the early 1990s. Their sound most often can be classified as space rock, and they've flirted with neo-psychedelia, experimental rock, and shoegaze. In the late 90s, they gave us Ladies and Gentlemen, We Are Floating in Space. At a second over 17 minutes, the closing track, Cop Shoot Cop, blends many of the subgenre I mentioned just now. Among their longest songs, Spiritualized is no stranger to those on the longer side, with several over 8 to 10 minutes long, including Hey Jane, you've got I'm Coming Home Again off of their most recent 2022 album, and Won't Get Into Heaven, The State I'm In. And then there's I Think I'm in Love. And that's just scratching the surface, really. Speaking of long instrumental breakdowns, is a band that is essentially just instrumental. Aside from prog rock, if any genre of music screams long tracks, it's post-rock. These bands lean into experimentation and nonconformity when it comes to rock music, weaving in melodic, heartfelt emotion and long, drawn-out instrumental breaks. Obviously, given this band is predominantly an instrumental one, it is Explosions in the Sky. They are the first of a few truly post-rock bands on this list, and on my 8+ minute list coming soon. All 5 songs on this 2003 LP, The Earth Is Not a Cold Dead Place, are over 8 minutes, with the only moment we were alone being the longest at just over 10, and it is my pick for the top long song on this album. I've been a fan of Explosions in the Sky for decades now, and was quite surprised when they lent their music to the movie Friday Night Lights in 2004. Despite the glaring juxtaposition of driving emotive instrumentals from Explosions in the Sky with something as brutish and bro-y as football, the true surprise was kind of how well it worked. I love the range post-rock bands like this have, from going from barely audible lows to soul-crushing noise. It drives home the power, the emotion, and honestly, their greatness. I don't often think of emotionally powerful songs when I think of a band like Of Montreal. Blending the makeup and vibrant colors of glam with the quirkier side of indie pop, and honestly throwing in very, very strong hints of psych pop as well, these things don't often mesh with crushing souls and epic lengths. Yet on their 2007 LP, Hissing Fauna, Are You the Destroyer, they give us precisely that in the near 12-minute long midpoint, The Past is a Grotesque Animal. This song, for the most part, avoids the long instrumental breakdowns. A deep listen, though, will give you plenty of experimentation in the instrumentation. And Kevin Barnes, the frontman, also goes on an almost lyrical tirade that seems like a poetic improvisational ramble. It's so distinctly different from what you'd expect from Of Montreal, yet so definitively them. In 2020, after closing in on a 2-decade hiatus under the guise of The Microphones, Phil Elverum brought his old project back for a lone album containing a single song spanning 44 minutes and 44 seconds. It's a stripped-down, nostalgic piece filled with as much experimentation as you can pack into a minimalistic song that mostly contains just a man and his guitar. This is a true epic masterpiece. Microphones and his other project, Mount Erie, are big favorites of mine, and one of the installations from the Pacific Northwest that I miss the most about living there. Questionably indie, but so influential I can't help but include it on the list. Fronted by the notorious Iggy Pop, the Stooges' self-titled debut from 1969 often gets a sizable nod as being one of the most influential albums of all time for rock, and a precursor to punk rock. We Will Fall sees the band dipping into experimental waters, which is so fundamentally different from what you tend to get from the Stooges, yet it's entirely brilliant at the same time. Filled with guitar drones, Iggy Pop's wandering vocals, and psychedelic-leaning sounds, it's hard not to include this on the list. So good. Like Explosions in the Sky, Silver Mount Zion is full-on post-rock. Aside from the similarities in subgenre and a predilection toward lengthy tracks, the similarities are kind of sparse from there. A Silver Mount Zion, the Silver Mount Zion, or the Silver Mount Zion and Tra-La-La Band typically has lyrics and leans heavily on non-traditional instruments when it comes to rock, two things that are distinctly different from Explosions in the Sky. You'll find lots of strings here. The track that really got me into this band was God Bless Our Dead Marines off of this 2005's album Horses in the Sky. Emotion, instrumental breakdowns, experimentation, and movements, and honestly, narrative. This song has all four elements that make up a great song. The brutality of war and the emotional turmoil that follows. Truly listening to the lyrics of this song, it never fails to bring tears to my eyes. In particular, when the frontman recounts all the ways he lost all his friends. Still, it's not only a hard pill to swallow, no pun intended. Make it past the grating vocals in the first movement, and you are sure to be wowed. Often creating quirky, experimental, electronic music with songs like Woody Woodpecker, that's with extra O's, and Whammy Daddy, and All Wet and No Boner. Wham City strays into weirdo, pseudo-emotional, psychedelic electronica. Not entirely broken into movements, the song does seem to have phases. It's wildly colorful, unique, and really freaking good. And a bit unexpected from an artist like Dan Deacon. And that brings us to the end of part one of this list. Also questionably indie. This is the highly influential post-punk band and the 10-minute, 38-second title track off the 1977 album Marquee Moon by Television. Once again, questionably indie, but I'm doing it anyway. It, and the album as a whole, is just so good. Probably one of my Desert Island top 5 albums in terms of ones that I think are truly inspirational and influential. Remember, all my lists are compiled of tracks or albums from within my collection, so there are likely some pretty glaring omissions. Which leaves me to you. What would you add to this list? Let me know what your top 10-minute plus songs are in the comments below. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about Marquee Moon and the story about how Brian Eno, yes, the Brian Eno, sat down with the band to record demos for this album, check out this video right here. I pulled this one together in early 2023 after Television frontman Tom Verlaine passed away. Stay tuned for part 2 that features songs that don't quite hit that 10-minute mark, but are over 8 for additional indie epics. I'll see you next time.